This is perhaps the biggest debate in the 4th generation 4Runner community, which is better, the 4-liter V6 or the 4.7 V8. For starters, comment below which engine you prefer and your reasoning why. But leave the brass knuckles at home, will you? Now I happen to own both of these, although my 4-liter happens to be in a Tacoma. Same thing. If anything, this performs a little bit better because the Tacoma is a little bit lighter. So this is going to be based on my experience of owning a 4.7 with about 260,000 kilometers on it and a 4-liter with 340,000 kilometers on it. Now, to be clear, both of these are great engines. They're both incredibly reliable and they have enough power to be able to use the truck for whatever you want to use it for. So this is really just a matter of personal preference. So let's compare the V6 and the V8 here, starting with performance. Now, the V6 here makes 245 horsepower and 282 foot-pounds of torque. In terms of the V8, the earlier 03 and 04 V8s made 235 horsepower and 320 foot-pounds of torque, but in 2005 they updated it with VVTi and a higher compression ratio, and it got bumped up to 270 horsepower and 330 foot-pounds of torque. It's worth noting that Toyota changed the way they measured horsepower in 2006, so on paper the newer engines are actually rated for less, although realistically they make the same power as the 2005 model. In my experience, I can't really argue that the 4-liter produces adequate power to get the job done. You know, it has no problem getting up to speed to merge on highways or anything like that. The V8, however, it just seems to do everything with much less effort. So if you're climbing the same hill or hauling the same load, the V6 here is going to need to drop a gear and rev higher in order to get the job done, where the V8 just kind of idles its way through things. I can tell you though that when driving both of these back to back, you can definitely feel the advantage of the V8 making 80% of its torque at only 1100 RPM. Now, the V6 fans will often claim that, you know, these numbers on paper don't make that much of a difference, that the V8 is not that much better. But let me ask you this, if you had the chance to install like an intake or an exhaust that was going to give you 48 extra foot-pounds of torque, would you consider that a worthwhile upgrade? I know I would. So the winner in terms of performance, I think, is quite obviously the V8, and I'm going to go ahead and put a link down in the description for you guys to an article that has tables and graphs of all of the stats and figures of these engines compiled in the same spot that you can take a look at and compare them a little bit easier. So it's kind of interesting that the V6 and the V8 4Runners have two different four-wheel drive systems on them. All of the four-wheel drive 4Runners have locking center differentials, and aside from the rare Trail Edition that came in, I think it was 2009, none of them had locking rear diffs. So they were all open differentials front and rear, aside from that one model. Now again, I know this is a Tacoma, but it's the same thing. The 4Runners with the 4-liter V6 had a traditional 2 high, 4 high, and 4 low setting on the transfer case. Now in comparison, the V8 4Runners were full-time four-wheel drive. So as you can see, they only have 4 high and 4 low settings. There's no 2-wheel drive setting on these V8 4Runners. This one really comes down to personal preference because neither is really better than the other. Some people prefer the efficiency of having a 2-wheel drive setting, while others appreciate the simplicity of, you know, having basically what is a hands-free all-wheel drive system, especially when you're driving in bad weather. You can just kind of set it and forget it. So this one's a tie. By the way, this is also probably a good time to mention that the first 2 years of V6 4Runners had 4-speed transmissions, while the 2005 and newer and all the V8 models had 5 speeds. Now, both the V6 and the V8 are equally reliable. It's true, you can't go wrong with either one of these, and it's kind of interesting, they both have sort of one known flaw that you have to look out for. So the first 2 years of these 4-liter V6s were kind of known for having blown head gaskets, and although I have read stories online about newer V6s suffering from head gasket failures, it was commonly the first 2 model years of these. The official word is that Toyota improved the head gasket in 2005, and I haven't had any issues with my V6 during the time that I've owned it. Again, this is 340,000 K on it. And then the main complaint with the 4.7 V8 is the secondary air injection system. This is only found in the 2005 and newer models, but it can be pretty expensive to fix, man. Now, mine hasn't had any issues with it whatsoever during the whole time that I've owned it, But I did install a bypass kit from Hewitt Technologies just to be safe. And so essentially what I've done is disabled the whole system while it was still working perfectly, and then I'd never have to worry about that. Another common issue with these 4.7 V8s is cracked exhaust manifolds. Now, I don't necessarily consider this a reliability issue because it's not really something that's going to leave you stranded, right? It's just a ticking noise that's going to drive you crazy, but it's not going to keep you from getting where you want to go. Mine had a cracked manifold when I bought it, and so I had a set of Doug Thorley short tube headers installed on it right off the bat. And then this way I never have to deal with those cracked manifolds ever again. If you replace it with another Toyota manifold, there's always that chance that that one's going to crack again too. So I feel like that's the best fix for that. The good news is both the V6 and the V8 require very little maintenance to keep them on the road running happily. The biggest complaint that people have with the 4.7 is the fact that it has a timing belt that needs to be changed. So it is true, you need to change it every 100,000 miles or so. Now, I don't feel like this is as big of a deal as people make it out to be, because A, how often do you hit 100,000 miles? And B, there's engines like the 3S GTE from Toyota or the 2JZ from Toyota that are both pretty legendary, and nobody complains about those having timing belts, so why is the V8 such a big deal? Some people have reported that they've never even changed their timing belts despite racking up hundreds of thousands of miles. Some have even said that they've snapped them, but it didn't cause any damage to the engine despite this 2UZ being considered an interference engine. Regardless, you should probably do what Toyota recommends just to be safe. Another maintenance related thing worth mentioning is the location of the oil filter. So on the V8, I don't know if you can see it, it's way down there. You need to remove the lower skid plate in order to get access to it, whereas the V6 here is right at the very top, super easy to get at, even has a cute little funnel at the bottom of it to catch any oil that falls out of it. So changing the oil on a 4-liter is much easier than on a 4.7. With that said, neither of them are difficult. I can change the oil in the 4Runner in probably 20 minutes. It's not a big deal as long as you can get your skid plate off. So it's not a big deal, but it is an advantage for the 4-liter nonetheless. Now, as you'd expect, the V8 is definitely worse on gas than the V6 is. The difference isn't actually that drastic though. The 4-liter gets about 2 miles per gallon better than the 4.7, and keep in mind that this could change if you plan on running bigger tires. The V6 will have to work a lot harder to spin them, which might close that gap a little bit in between these two engines. If you're going to run a set of 35s on your 4Runner with either of these engines, obviously the V8 is going to be able to turn them a lot easier, and in turn it's going to be a little bit more efficient at that point if you are going to modify it. But in stock form, got to give the win to the 4-liter. Now the V8 is rated to tow quite a bit more than the V6 is, but in my opinion it's not quite that simple. You see, a V8 4Runner is rated to tow 7,000 pounds, while the V6 can tow 5,000. In my experience with towing a camper through the Rocky Mountains though, I wouldn't want to tow 7,000 pounds with a 4Runner, unless I'm staying in the city maybe. In my opinion, the 4Runner's weak point is stability, it's not power or torque. A big heavy trailer has the potential to throw the 4Runner around in high winds or steep grades due to its light weight and its short wheelbase. So I feel like a more realistic comparison would be, how well can a V8 4Runner tow 5,000 pounds compared to the V6? The answer to that is much better. My 4Runner pulled like a champ, even up steep hills where a V6 model would definitely be screaming with higher RPMs. So it's no surprise here the V8 4Runner wins in towing capabilities. Finally, last but not least, let's compare driving characteristics. The 4-liter makes more mechanical noise, I find, and it runs noticeably rougher than the 4.7, especially at idle. And I think this is the reason why Lexus chose to only offer the 4.7 in its GX470, which, if you're not familiar, is just a 4Runner in a tuxedo. The V8 just feels so much smoother and much more refined. The difference in sound, guys, come on, that's a no-brainer. There's a reason why my 4Runner here has a Gibson exhaust on it, while the Tacoma is kept quiet, like with a perfectly stock exhaust system. The V6s are just more raspy, they've got more of a high-pitched sound, they just sound like a V6, whereas these 4.7s, I would argue, are one of the best sounding V8s out there. But you have to open them up in order to hear them, because with the stock exhaust system on these, they're whisper quiet. Then you have the rarity and the uniqueness, I guess you could say, of the V8 4Runners, because Toyota only offered a V8 in the 4Runner for 6 out of the 40 years that it's been for sale. So if you think about that, that makes these V8 4Runners pretty special, and I think they're only going to get more sought after as time goes on, and they're already really holding their value pretty well these days. So the great sound, the smooth revs, and the way they pull hard right up from idle makes them really enjoyable to drive, which is why I prefer the V8 over the V6, especially after driving them back to back. With that said, both of these engines are going to go down in history as some of the best engines Toyota has ever put in their trucks, I think. The V6 here, it's really good. I would just say that the V8 is gooder. Now, do me a favor guys, if you found this video helpful, go ahead and hit the like button, and if you didn't, then please hit the dislike button. That's just gonna help me to know what kind of content you guys wanna see in the future. Now, if you wanna know more about how these individual trucks compare, the Tacoma versus the 4Runner, I've got another video that I filmed a while ago. Go ahead and click that one on the screen right now, and thank you guys for watching. I'll catch you on the next one.